How's my favorite class today? Today, boys and girls, we're going to talk about socialization, specifically re-socialization. Re-socialization is a process where you learn new skill sets that you require in order to function in an environment that you are being introduced to. I've been very lucky in my life. I've experienced both forms of re-socialization, and there are two. There is voluntary re-socialization and there is involuntary re-socialization. I've experienced both, and I'll give you my overview, my interpretation of experiencing both. Voluntary. When I was young, well over a quarter of a century ago, I volunteered. I took a job in an Inuit community in the Arctic, in the Canadian Arctic. And I flew, there was no roads, I flew into the community. And I get off the plane, and I soon learned as I stepped off the little bush plane that the environment I was immersed in was socially different than the environment I was exposed to growing up on Cape Breton Island. And one of the best examples I have of that, and I've had several, but one of the best examples I have is in relation to food. One day I get a knock at my door. I'm there probably a couple of days or a week. And 4 little children were at my door, and they wanted to sell me some soapstone carvings. So I looked at the carvings and I thought they were absolutely beautiful, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to buy one of these carvings. So anyway, I went in to get my wallet to get some money, and the kids followed me in the house, and I turned around and they were in my house, and one of the children looked at my pantry. I had a small pantry off the kitchen in which I had stockpiled a year's worth of required foodstuffs, because it was an isolated village, and I thought it in my best interest to stockpile as much food as I could to get me through the winter. One of the children looked at me with disdain in his eyes. He looked at me, and you can tell disdain because it's the only asymmetrical facial feature. So if you watch a person, if you see one side of their face, provided they didn't have a stroke or something, if you find a little distortion in one side of your face, that's disdain. So I watch this child as his corner of his lip rose, and he looks at me and he says, "You're greedy, mister." And I had absolutely no earthly idea why he was calling me greedy. And I said, "Oh, what do you mean I'm greedy?" He said, "You have all this food and you don't share it." And that was a foreign concept to me, because where I grew up in Cape Breton, like if I went out and got a bunch of canned goods from the local co-op, well, good for me, I have food. There's no reason that I should share them. If my neighbor's house burned down and needed food, well, yes, I would share then, or something of the equivalent. If someone needed some, I would share. But I did not see myself as being greedy because I had a pantry with foodstuffs. The children in that environment shared with me very early on that I was greedy. A little while later, the snow had come down and the caribou herd was moving close to the village. So I'm a hunter. So the first thing I do is I grab my rifle and I jump on my machine, and I'm going with a good friend of mine, one of my best friends ever. His name was Jim Webb. So I'm going with my good friend Jim Webb, and we're going out on the land to harvest some caribou. And when I started packing up my machine, my skidoo, they're commonly called in Cape Breton, but a snow machine, a snowmobile, I had an elder in the community come up to me and said, "I'll take 2. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, "2? What are you talking about?" He said, "I'll take 2. I said, "2 what?" "Tuk tuk," which was the Inuit word for caribou. He said, "I'll take 2 caribou." And I thought, what do I look like here? Like Burger King? Like nobody has ever come to me, and I've been hunting my entire life, and said, "Listen, do you mind getting me 2 rabbits? Do you mind doing that?" Like, that just wasn't common. But that was the accepted norm of the Inuit society. If I was going out on the land for myself, I would get caribou for those who could no longer do that. There are my two stories about voluntary socialization. I lived immersed in the culture, and I learned the culture being surrounded by the culture. It was voluntary. I chose it. Involuntary socialization is a different kettle of fish. Involuntary socialization is where you're immersed into an environment where you're to be re-socialized, usually in a short order, in a defined time frame, and usually it's in total isolation. The two best examples I have of that are prison would be a good example, and basic training in any of the armed forces anywhere in the world. Well, I haven't been to prison, but I've been involved in the Canadian Armed Forces. During the Cold War in the late 1980s, I did basic training in the Canadian Armed Forces. And what happened? Well, as soon as you get immersed into that environment, the first thing they do is they treat everybody the same, just like crap. There's a hazing process, I guess would be a good descriptor, that they do to normalize everybody. In prison, from what I'm told, you go to prison, the first thing they do, you show up at a prison, is they strip you naked, so you have to stand humiliated in front of everybody naked. And they read you the riot act about how you are to behave in this environment. Well, it's pretty similar in the Canadian Forces. The first thing, everybody gets their hair cut, so everybody is the same, and then you're giving a uniform to diminish your individual identity. So everybody looks the same, and everybody is to behave in the same manner. This is involuntary socialization. So what else do they do? Well, it depends on the extent they're trying to re-socialize you. Typically, in a basic training environment, what they do is they deprive you of sleep, and they put physical work for you to do. They require you to do things that are very physical, so you burn up energy, so you become tired. And when you become tired, you tend to operate more on the subconscious mind. I talked a little bit about Freud, and I think I sent you guys some definitions on Freud. Freud had three component parts to the human psyche: the id, the ego, and the superego. And they are subconscious in your mind, meaning you don't think about them. We'll talk more about that a little later. The subconscious mind, what the subconscious is the mind, the part of your mind in the human body that's looking after your body. It's the source of all your skills. It's in the subconscious. And a great example of that would be driving a car. So in order to drive a car, you walk out to a vehicle, you put your foot, you open up the door, you step inside, you put your foot on the brake in order to touch the ignition button or to turn the key, and you put the vehicle with your foot on the brake, you put it into drive, and you drive away. Now, I would hazard a guess as to say nobody remembers doing that. When you get in your car to drive it, you don't physically think, you don't concentrate and say, I have to now take the key and put it in the ignition. I have to now take this foot, put it on the brake pedal before I turn the key. Now I have to turn the key, and the millisecond the car starts, I have to leave my hand go, or else I will wreck the starter on the car. You don't think of that. That's all ingrained. It's all in your subconscious mind. In involuntary socialization, they try to get to your subconscious mind to kind of reprogram it. And the best way to do that is to make you tired. If they make you tired from lack of sleep and make you tired from physical exertion, well, then you're working on subconscious skills. And when you work on the subconscious, in direct contact with the subconscious, it's a little easier for the powers that are running the organization to implant some stuff into your subconscious. And you might not know that until years later. And the best story I have to reinforce that concept, about a quarter of a century after I took basic training in the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm hunting, and I'm hunting in a place called Framboise in Cape Breton. And I shot a deer, and I was looking for help to get the deer out. So I drive to my friends. My friends have a trailer. There's two of them, my hunting buddies. And they're in the trailer, and I pull up, and it's dark when I get there. So it was at dusk when I got the deer. So I pull up, and I walk in the trailer. And my two friends are there, and their speech is slurred. And I'm looking at them very curiously. I'm wondering, why is their speech slurred? So I'm watching them, and they're saying, sit down, have a cup of tea, we'll go with you in a minute, just relax. And then I'm starting to notice they're a little wobbly. And I'm thinking, man, are you guys okay? Like, is there something wrong? And as I'm wondering that, and I'm kind of questioning why they're behaving the way they are, my legs get weak and I fall down. I woke up a little while later, and the light above me was moving. It was changing. And when I saw that, and when I say changing, I mean it was almost moving like it was in and out. And when I saw that, I looked up and saw that I was laying on the floor. I immediately figured I was being gassed. And here's what I did. I yelled, gas, 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 and reached down with my left hand to grab my gas mask. Now, that's pretty profound, and I'll tell you why. Because I never thought of gas in the 25 years since basic training. Never even crossed my mind the thought of gas. However, in basic training, this was during the Cold War, there was a lot of emphasis on biological, chemical, and nuclear warfare. And we received a lot of training on how you deal with gas. And when you notice gas, the first thing you do is yell out, you breathe out, gas, 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 without inhaling, then you pull your mask on. Anyway, it doesn't matter the procedure. But you say gas, gas, gas to warn your friends, and then you reach down, and everybody in the Canadian Forces had a bag on their left side. They were issued on their left leg, they were issued their gas mask, and that's where it was kept. That and some various other things that were required were in that bag, stickers and needles, but they were in that bag for gas warfare. Well, 25 years later, I never thought of gas, never even crossed my mind yet. The minute I realized I was being gassed, and I was not working on, I was not in my right frame of mind because I was near death. My subconscious kicked in and I yelled, gas, 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 and this hand went for my gas mask on my leg. I'm still blown away by that story. I'm still amazed at that I was socialized, I was re-socialized to the point where I did that.